That's 1973, a rock and roll brackets. I gave you the best years of my life, close brackets, by a gentleman called Kevin Johnson, an Australian artist who conveniently happens to be on the other end of the telephone. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. What a magnificent song.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad you liked it. Yeah.
How autobiographical is it?
The first third of it would be totally true, driving the family mad with a few songs, and but then after that I changed it to anybody who was on a fanatical, hell-bent for following the rock and roll trends would have been in those places at that time, in their mind anyway, not physically. So, when I say England and America and such forth.
And can you still remember when you bought your first guitar? That's the obvious question.
Yes, I can. I have no idea where I bought it from, but I remember taking off in a hurry one day and I forgot to shut the door on the other side, and it went round the corner. Flew out and slid right across the road, but it didn't seem to affect it too much. How to start off with. Yeah.
So, Kevin, those early influences that drove you to go and buy that guitar, was it family related? As a lot of artists seem to have a family connection to music, but others are just completely besotted with someone, maybe the Stones or the Beatles. What was your start?
My mother tried to teach me the violin. Well, I used to memorise the bits, and I'd be watching the kids who were waiting for the train, and we lived in the country. I'd be watching them playing, and finally she walked in and realised I wasn't reading any of the notes, and said, "I'll put it away and go and play with the kids." I did nothing about it until I was in my late teens, I think, and I heard one song, which was Roy Orbison's "Only the Lonely," and that was the one that drove me in this direction completely. And then after singing in beer gardens or whatever, Rockhampton for some time, I joined a band and we played all the Beatles records and Stones and people like that. So the Roy Orbison and then the Beatles were the two major influences.
There's probably, in my opinion, no better male voice in the history of popular music than Roy Orbison's. Did you find yourself trying to mimic him, or did you say, well, that's impossible to chase, I'll just be me?
I used to do a lot of his songs on stage, as I said, in the beer gardens, and maybe later I did quite a few of them, Pretty Woman and whatever, and a lot of them. I didn't ever try to mimic him because we have totally different type of voices either. I was closer to Johnny Cash than Roy Orbison, but I still did them, and he was a very unique voice. There's no doubt about that. And the whole production team, the strings and the arrangements, and the whole thing was totally unique at the time. Yeah.
So Rockhampton, obviously not known for being, the Nashville of Australia. How does someone who's singing in a beer garden in Rockhampton suddenly find themselves with a couple of hits in across Australia and, in fact, in America as well? You were quite well known.
Yeah, and Europe would be my main market always. But I sent songs off to I started writing songs and sent them off to a number of people, and it was an amusing story. I sent one to Johnny Chester, and he loved it, and he wrote back and he said, "I love this song and I'm going to record it." This is before he was a country sort of thing. He was more of a pop singer then, and I never heard from him for a long time. And I was walking around Bellevue Hill in Sydney one day, and I got a phone call, and he said, "I finished that song. It sounds great." And I said, "That's good. It's taken 40 bloody years." I'm really pleased to hear it. Sounds great.
I was going to say that the years must have passed. When you said you were walking around the street and got a phone call, that clearly didn't happen in the 70s.
No, exactly, no. 40 years later, he rang me and said, "I finished it. It's great," it was a great version of it. But after that, back then, I got in with the Jacobson family, Cole Joy, and all of those who had ATA and all of their artists. So I wrote a lot of songs for their artists, Little Patty and Judy Stone and Sandy Scott and Kyle Joy and whatever. Then I started recording my own stuff, and then I moved away from there and on to other things.
So obviously people like Neil Diamond started off as songwriters and for other people and became well known. What was the first hit that you had as Kevin Johnson rather than passing it over to someone else?
Well, the first thing I had was a thing called Woman You Took My Life, which I recorded in 1968, I think it was, probably one of the first recordings I ever did. No, there was one before that. It was called Hayman Island, but and then I did it. Woman Took My Life, and that was immediately picked up by Decca in England, which was very unique at that stage because very few Australian records got released overseas. And Tom Jones picked it up, and so it still remains one of my sort of more popular songs. So that would have been the first one to break through. And then after that, there was a bit of a space, and then there came Bonnie Please Don't Go, which was number one or number two across Australia generally.
That is a song that I was asked, because I used to have a program where I was focused mainly on music, and I was asked to rank my top 30 Australian songs of all time. And Bonnie Please Don't Go absolutely gets into the top 10. It is just a fantastic song. I reckon the underlying tune might have been written by somebody else, Old Lang Syne, but fundamentally it is the saddest thing I've ever heard, and I can just imagine the poor bloke standing at the gangway.
Yeah, the humorous song, humorous story about that, in that when I was in Rockhampton playing at Beer Gardens, there was one particular hotel which will remain nameless, but it was like the scenes from that Star Wars where some people got one big eye in the middle of their head. Unbelievable, the worst place ever. And anyway, there was a drunken woman used to be there every night, and she was always full of the bird every night. And I was sitting on stage, finished singing 18 Yellow Roses or something, and she became overcome with emotion. She ran down, swaying, knocking tables over and whatever. And I was sitting on the stool, and she ran up and threw her arms around me. We both crashed backwards onto the stage, and her slobbering all over me. It was unbelievable. And her name was Bonnie. And, years later, when I wrote the song, I was looking for some sort of Scottish tie-in with the title, and my wife said, well, what about Bonnie? And it was obvious it had to be Bonnie. So that was how the name came in the song, but it was an amusing story.
Sorry. So no, because I think that there are some songs that take you to where you are. Another one that drops, and one of Rob's favourites, Dream Academy's song "Life in a Northern Town." And when you hear that song, you are in a northern town. Every time I hear Bonnie Please Don't Go, which we're going to hear after we've had a chat to you, I'm standing on the gangway at either Circular Quay or Port Melbourne. I'm seeing the poor bloke and Colonel, who's banned, and the whole thing just comes to life. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good. At least it's had the right effect. Yes.
Neil touched with your first question about lived experience in writing songs. Was it always important for you to tell a story?
No, not necessarily. There were songs written, and just I suppose there's stories to a certain extent, but it can be just a straight love story or whatever. I don't think it's necessary to have any prerequisites there, but if the story is what you want to set out in the song, well, obviously that's good. Certainly, I've written quite a few of the story songs. Yes.
So I spoke to someone at work the other day and mentioned I was going to chat to you and named a couple of songs, and they said, I thought Mac Davis had Rock and Roll, I Gave You All the Best Years of My Life. Clearly Mac Davis's version was massive, as was Terry Jacks out of Canada. How did those links come up that you actually had those guys recording your songs?
Well, after I had, when Bonnie Please Don't Go was first released, I signed an American deal with Tree Music and Dial Records, a 3-year contract to write songs. When you mentioned Neil Diamond, this was the kind of thing that we're talking about. You just they paid me every week, and they wanted me to live in Nashville for 3 years, and I didn't want to go, so I stayed here and did it here. So they'd pay every week. They'd pay me just to sit and write songs. I could see we weren't going anywhere together in the terms of all they wanted was somebody down the road wants a song next week, and I'll give it to him. So, and I had just written rock and roll, so I left them, but they still have the publishing rights to rock and roll, and so they were obviously busy with once it became a hit for me. Then it was re-released a couple of years. It went on for quite a number of years. In UK, there was UK Records, which was owned by Jonathan King, and he re-released it a couple of years after it had been a sort of a hit, and it was a hit again, and that's when Mac Davis picked it up, and Terry Jacks and a number of other people.
Because I would have thought that that's pretty handy exposure, getting names of that ilk, picking up your song and recording them for you.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, it certainly was very good. As I said, the first big cover version I had was Tom Jones, but that was quite a few years before then. And, you know, since then there's been other people, Roger Whittaker, and, well, there's a long list of people. But certainly it was good to see. And Mac Davis' version was very successful. In the United States, it was probably the most successful. I was in the charts first with it in the States, but his was slightly bigger. And Terry Jacks was in Canada, and you know, Joe Dassin, I think, had it in France, and maybe the Cats had it in Holland. So there's a lot of people in different areas had different hits with it. Yeah.
There's a lot of artists. We wonder, actually, you make a living, but when we hear or think of musicians, we think of fame and fortune. Is this industry just been one that's kept you ticking over, or has it allowed you a fair bit of comfort in life?
Well, it's just, I wouldn't like to say it's comfort in life. I might have the tax man ringing.
It's all right, he's got Rob on speed dial.
Yeah.
How come you sent us these photos of you going through the bins, you know? So, yeah, well, it's kept rolling along, let's say, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that these days you don't get to perform very much or write many songs?
Well, I have a number of songs written, working out the best way to present them, and what to do with them, sort of thing. And certainly I keep writing, and as I said, there's always, because I released overseas as well, and so there's always some sort of new deal that one has to be considering there, or whatever, in terms of it all rolling along, sort of thing. So there's always plenty to do. Plenty to do. I think I said before, in ever decreasing circles.
Kevin, have you got the skill yourself to know when you've written one that this is a good one as opposed to a pedestrian one? Because I've been intrigued the way a song can be taken by a producer or an individual artist and made to sound completely different to someone else's version. So one's not popular, one is. The art of songwriting, is it as simple as you saying, yep, that's a good one?
Yes, well, to answer the question, if you've been writing songs for a long time, and most songwriters would agree with this, you can have somebody just pick up a guitar and do a very basic version, but you can say that is a great song. And it is a great song, there's no denying. There is a fine dividing line between a great song and a mediocre one, and most people with a good ear can hear that. You don't need the great production. But, having said that, a lot of people have the ability to produce something of a very mediocre song and make it into a monster, and that's one of the great arts of production. So, a good song is a good song, and that's obvious when you just do a very minimal version of it. But then there is the other art of making something very mediocre into something really fantastic. And as I said, they're two different arts.
I want to take you back to the start when you talked about the violin, and I must admit that over the years I've loved strings meeting rock and roll, and Russell Morris has got an album out recently where he's done all these great songs from 60s and 70s with an orchestral backup. I find it beautiful and intriguing, and is that the sort of thing you mean about changing that production to take something, making something quite spectacular from a pretty basic start?
Well, that can be. Most of his, a lot of them would have been hits anyway, in its original form, so they're doing a version of it now with strings, whatever. But what I was meaning was something that it sort of emerges upon the world for the first time, and it's fantastic, everybody loves it. But if you narrow it down and you say, well, what was the original song? It is very basic, if you know what I mean. So it's to do with the producer working out what the bass is going to do and what the the guitars are going to do, and they come up with a nice riff and whatever it runs to, and that is catching the ear as well as the actual melody and the lyrics. So it's a combination of things. All records are a combination of all the different parts, and some of them work with the mass audience and some don't. So, but in terms of strings, and I mentioned that in relation to Roy Orbison, he was one of the first ones. I think the woman was called, I can't think of the name, she used to do string arrangement and vocal arrangements, and they were just clever strings. The use of strings were very clever in those Orbison records, very dramatic, and lifted it amazingly from what had happened before in that regard.
It certainly matched his voice.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So, Kevin, as we come towards the end of our time, a couple of questions I love asking singer-songwriters. If you could choose a song that you've heard over the journey that you would love to say that you wrote, what would it be? How's that for a bit of a curly one for this time of the day?
Yeah, there's so many of them. My mind is racing through a million songs. I said Only the Lonely before, but certainly that was the one that started me in this direction. But that was coupled with the amazing voice. Mm. So in terms of songs, I suppose Yesterday would be certainly one. Anything the Beatles did would be something I'd aspire to be able to have written, yes. There's so many others. I mean, it's very difficult to pick one out. But in terms of a straight, catchy song, I suppose Doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you, whatever that was.
Yeah. Wow.
That's just a great song. But, the list goes on.
Yeah. One that's equally difficult. Suppose you sit down this afternoon and you write the best song you've ever written, because Russell Morris always reckons his best song is ahead of him. So let's assume you write the world's best song and you think, actually, I'm not going to record this. I want someone else to record it. Who do you ask to record it?
Well, that's a big question, because when I wrote Rock and Roll, people said that exact same question to me. And before I'd actually released it, and I said, well, the person I could absolutely hear singing this is Mac Davis. Without any coaching whatsoever, or any work on my behalf or anybody here, he actually picked it up and did it.
Oh, there you go.
He didn't do it the way I thought he would have done it, strangely enough. I liked his version, but I liked the Cats probably better. And because he was a little bit more strident than I would have thought. But it's amazing how you go when you think of somebody who's going to do it. The other thing is, when you're thinking of somebody who might do a song, you're always thinking of what they've done in the past, and 90% of the time they're thinking of what they're going to do in the future. It doesn't always transcend, you know what I mean? So,
yeah. Well, there's a couple of philosophical ones for you to ponder this afternoon. Kevin, it has been an absolute joy to catch up with you. As I said, I think Bonnie Please Don't Go, which we're going to, is absolutely one of the best Australian songs ever. And Rock and Roll You Gave Me the Best Years of Your Life just stands up on its own. So those two songs, plus the absolute catalogue of other great songs that you've got, people can go to, is it Rock and... No, I gave you the best... No, I'm trying to think what your website is.
Yes. Oh, there's a simple way of getting there.
Yeah.
Johnson, Kevin-Johnson.net.
There you go, Kevin-Johnson.net. Go there and have a look at the catalogue of music. It is just...
Would it be a plethora, Neil?
It's borderline plethora.
Yep.
But it's absolutely sensational. Kevin, thanks for taking some time out of your Saturday morning to spend some time with the two blokes in Geelong. We've absolutely loved it.
Great. It's been great to talk to you. And who are the team playing today? Who are they playing today?
The Cats have got the Demons at the MCG tonight, Kevin.
Oh, I see. Oh, well, all the best with us, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm a Lions man, so I'm part of the Queensland contingent, you see. So you and I will be on the Lions, I reckon.
Our two sons are demented Swans fans.
Oh, they'll get over that, hopefully. All the best, Kevin.
Kevin,
cheers.
thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks, mate.
Bye.
There he is, Kevin Johnson, legendary Australian muso. What a great bloke.
Yeah, I said to you off air, Neil, I have the privilege of having the little pre-interview chats with so many wonderful people, and sometimes I think, oh, this is going to be really good. This bloke's up and about, happy to be here. And other times you think, ooh, this might be hard work. But he warmed into that. That was a delightful conversation, very open, giving, once again, humble person who just, as Russell Morris says, it's just a gift. It's something I've got. I can't make kitchen cupboards, so I can write songs, and I think Kevin Johnson's a bit like that. In fact, he said off air that writing songs was just work for him. It wasn't necessarily a ridiculous passion. He did it because he needed to make money, and that's what he found he was good at.
Yeah.
So it was just work, and most others have probably been a bit more passionate about their songwriting. But anyway, still a very interesting conversation.